Please be seated. I haven't even given my report yet. Come on. You might not like it, so maybe it's a good thing that we did this to start the service. I will tell you that one of the hardest things about preparing this report today is that all of our churches reported, and you're just going to hear about a few of them. But I want you to know, read your handbook, read every report. There's so many great stories, and there's struggles, and we want you to hear and read and pray for them. And so I just want you to know it's in my heart to mention everybody, but I don't have time to do that, so we will mention a few just as examples. Well, Dr. Chambo, Reverend O'Rourke, Mrs. Comfort, and members and friends of the Prairie Lakes District, good morning. Bienvenidos, Jamrebsua, bonjour, to my Haitian friends. Isn't it great to be on the beautiful campus of Lake Geneva and gathering together like this? And I also want to welcome all those who are watching by video or online. To Dr. Chambo, our General Superintendent, it is such a joy to have served with you this past year. You got to see his heart last night. You'll see it even more today. He is the real deal. We welcome all of you and celebrate this report of the churches, the ministries, the ministers, and leaders of the Prairie Lakes District. Thank you to each one of you who is here today. We know many of you drove a long ways to get here, and we know that the price of gas is a little higher this year than it was last year, so thank you for that sacrifice. We have several people today who are here for their first time at this district assembly, and we especially welcome you, especially if you're new to the Nazarene movement. We're really glad that you're here today. Now, last year, as I shared my report with you, the theme last year was In This Together. And I just want to recap that a little bit because it was important to what happened this last year. We broke down 3 words. We broke down the word in, this, and together. This we identified as the ministry and message of reconciliation. That's the this that we are in together. And then we talked about the in. So in with Christ that nothing can distract us or discourage us from the message of reconciliation. I referred to Acts chapter 5, verses 18 through 21, where the apostles were arrested for proclaiming the gospel and to the people that they could be reconciled to God through Christ. And as they were arrested and put in jail, God sent an angel to them. And it says this in verses 18 through 21, they arrested the apostles, put them in public jail. But during the night, an angel of the Lord opened the doors of the jail and then brought them out and instructed them this way. Go, stand in the temple courts, he said, and tell the people all about this new life. The apostles had a choice. They could obey God or do something different. Remember, they'd been in jail. Now they're set free. But we want to note that the apostles did not run or cower. Instead, they were obedient to God. They simply did what God asked of them. They were in, and nothing could stop them. And then the together. The prequel to what happened in Acts chapter 5, which we just read, started in Acts chapter 4. And in verse 32 it says, all believers were in one heart and mind. That was what started the whole thing. Did they agree on everything? If you read the New Testament, you'll find out they did not agree on everything. But they did agree on what mattered. They were together. Their hearts and minds were united. And what I find appealing and interesting in this event is that even being put in jail together did not cause division or blaming or fear. And if you go back and read the stories of what took place after this in the book of Acts, people were saved, people were healed, people were restored, people were set free from prison, both literally and figuratively in their souls. And after I gave my report last year and talked about those 3 words, someone came up to me and said, hey, when you said in this together, I was sure that the word this was going to mean the situation we're in. Not the message of reconciliation, but they said, I thought you were going to talk about, this world, the way it's changed and the situation we are in, COVID and isolation and racial tension and polarization, even in the church, moral decay in the society, economic instability, world crisis, weather patterns, all sorts of things. I thought, Pastor, you were going to talk about that. We're in this, but we're in this together. Well, the truth is, this is both the message of reconciliation, and all of the other stuff that we've experienced the past few years, the situations in our world. We are in this together. And Jay Height, who some of us on our district have a privilege of being in a cohort with him, he's the director of Shepherd Community Center in Indianapolis, and he's the Compassionate Ministries Director for the USA-Canada region. And he wrote an article which got published and was called The Great Unsettling. He did a great job of describing the this that we are in together. And I want to take some time to read part of his article for us today, just to set us up for what's coming next. All of this, he says, has left us unsettled as individuals and as a society. The ground has shifted, and fear, frustration, and anger have surged as our footholds in life suddenly feel less secure. Sociologists have a name for the instability we've experienced of late: anomie. It refers to the emotional, mental, and spiritual angst humans feel when common values and accepted standards have been erased. Murder and violent assaults in the United States surged in 2020 and rose again in 2021. The U.S. Surgeon General declared in December that America's young people are enduring a mental health crisis and that the nation has a moral obligation to help. The Great Leaving has pushed millions of Americans to quit their job, and more than 1.2 million fewer students have enrolled in college, and millions of people of faith no longer attend worship services. And Americans' unruly and rude behavior has surged at work, at school board meetings, on airplanes, and even in the grocery store. None of these trends have surprised us. Work from home, study from home, worship from home pulled us apart when we needed each other the most for emotional and spiritual support. We also, as a natural consequence of isolation, turned inward, and our fears and frustrations grew even larger in the solitary confinement of COVID breakdowns. And the committee I serve on at Mid-American Nazarene University, they were talking to us about college students and how much counsel is needed and how many appointments they have during the year because of the anxiety and fear that has just risen at a very high level among our students. Then, feeling unsettled and unstable, we lash out at seemingly anyone who crosses our path. So what's the answer to this, to anomie? How do we ground ourselves in such uncertain times? How do we help our family, friends, and neighbors regain a sense of stability? I'm still quoting Jay. My first response is rooted in my Christian faith, he says. As the old hymn says, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand." My faith doesn't make me immune to feeling unsettled and uncertain, and at times even frustrated and afraid. But it does help me find strength in the fact that there's a deeper purpose and meaning to life than the transitory nature of our existence on this planet. My faith, however, isn't about me. As a Christian, my mission is to love others. And to me, that means serving my neighbors, helping to meet their needs, passing on hope in times of fear and despair, listening to and encouraging them in good times and bad, and in all those times when life seems uncertain and so overwhelming. So as I read Jay's article, and as I've connected with pastors and leaders and people from all three of our states, I hear about the reality of this unsettling. I know what you have experienced. I know what I have experienced, and it has impacted all of us. And while our faith does not make us immune to being impacted by this unsettledness, it does give us reason to press on and run the race marked out for us. Therefore, our theme for this next year is this: undistracted. Undistracted. And the verse is Hebrews 11:12, 1 and 2. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing. You know what that word means? It means to fixate, focus on, don't lose sight of, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. We will talk more about our theme in a few moments. But first, let's talk about this past year. You were challenged to keep the message and ministry of reconciliation your main priority. We believe that every church on our district can be a multiplying, spirit-led, life-giving, healthy church. Amen? No matter what size or location or size of the town, whatever, your church can be a multiplying, spirit-led, life-giving, healthy church. You are challenged to pray intentionally for direction, protection, and revelation. Do you remember that a year ago? We handed out those cards with those 3 words on it. You can only imagine my surprise and joy when less than a month after our assembly, I went to our annual District Superintendent Leadership Development Program conference gathering. And our new regional director, Stan Reeder, introduced a new challenge to all of the USA and Canada titled the 500,000 Mobilization, where he was calling all Nazarene churches to pray, to listen, and to speak. And as you know by now, he asked us to pray about 3 things. You know what those 3 things were? Protection, direction, and revelation. And so many of you have taken that challenge seriously. I saw it in your reports. This last year, you were also asked to identify and develop new ministers. God is calling people. And we experience in this northern part of the United States, sometimes it's not easy to get people from Florida or California or Texas to move up our direction unless God actually speaks to them, which you need to pray about that, all right? Or we have to raise them up ourselves because, do you know what? I don't get this. But like people in Georgia don't understand how awesome Minot, North Dakota is. You know what I mean? They don't understand how awesome it is to be up in this beautiful part of the world serving wonderful, amazing people. So you were challenged to identify and develop new leaders. Some will be overseers, some will be pastors, some will be teachers, some will be evangelists, some will be prophets. And you were challenged to start more churches. I'm so proud of our pastors and leaders in churches for how you have truly given yourselves to the ministry and message of reconciliation, and that we have been in this together. So I would like to take some time this morning just to highlight some of the kingdom work that has been accomplished this last year. And while I can't tell every story or represent every church, we can get a taste of what the Holy Spirit has done through you. This past year, on our district and our churches, 820 people said yes to following Jesus, with 283 being baptized. Pastor Beth Nelson from our Fargo Prairie Heights Church, for example, reported 449 people saying yes and 48 being baptized. What is not included in that report, because it happened since the close of the year, was that as they wrapped up their year, and they wrapped it up with a series where they shared their vision for the next 2 years, and she says this in her report: as we have shared our vision to stand for the people of our community, I've been able to walk alongside of Prairie Hiders taking really bold faith steps, and it's been beyond inspiring. We are choosing to focus on 3 specific areas where we choose to stand: for changed lives, for future generations, for transformed community. We wrapped up our Stand Vision series with baptism. We had 34 people pre-registered to be baptized, and I happened to be there that day, and invited people to spontaneously get dunked that day too. The total number of people who made the decision to go public with their faith was 62. Every number has a name, and that's what matters to us. Now, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that your brother in that picture? Justin Erdman was one of the staff members who helped do baptism that day. And Justin had the privilege of leading his mom, right, your brother, and your sister to Jesus. And all 3 were baptized that day. Each church had its share of struggles and difficulties over the past few years, and Fargo Prairie Heights is no exception. What is good to note, though, is that in the midst of some of the biggest struggles a church can face, they chose to be undistracted in their mission to connect those apart from God with Christ in the church family. This afternoon, Doug Peters and Justin Erdman will be sharing their strategy and process in a breakout session this afternoon called I Can Do That, a how-to session on providing experiences to help people grow spiritually. Barry Strands from our Minneapolis Beltrami Community Church stated this in his report: each spring we host an annual retreat over Memorial Day weekend at Big Sandy Camp. We had 85 people attend, and for a congregation of 25, that feels encouraging. We experienced healing miracles, emotional transformations, several first-time professions of faith, and 4 baptisms, the highlight of our year. What you may not know about Beltrami community is that in the past few years, a church that is literally built around ministry to their neighborhood in Minneapolis, northeast Minneapolis, was unable to meet in the park building where they had been meeting for several years because of COVID. They shut down the park building. They shut down their meeting location. So you know what they did? They traveled to Inver Grove Heights Grace, where Pastor Will Hayworth pastors, about 20 miles, to have services during those years. They had to change their location. They had to change their meeting time. And again, the Grace Church opened up their door and hearts to them during this period. Beltrami community is now back in the Beltrami neighborhood, meeting in their park building. And even with all of the unsettledness, they remained undistracted from what God was calling them to do. Many of our churches have taken up the challenge to be intentionally praying for protection, direction, and revelation. Some churches really engaged in the challenge for not only to encourage their people to pray, but created specific spaces and times to pray together for protection, direction, and revelation. Pastor Nettie and Cassandra Perez from our Fargo-Moorhead Iglesia del Nazareno reported this: "We have seen our church grow in spiritual, numerical, and financial areas. We had 8 baptisms and have been integrating more people little by little into the communion of the church. Thank God, when people come to the city of Fargo, North Dakota, and look for a church on the internet in Spanish, they find us. This past year, they have gathered to pray on Tuesdays at 10 a.m., 10 p.m. Get that? Sorry, I said that wrong. They gather at 10 p.m. on Thursdays and 6 a.m. on Saturdays. He also reported that we continue with a permanent prayer and fasting group where our 5 petitions are: the conversion of the lost, the sanctification of believers, revival in the Church of Christ, for pastors, leaders, and their families, and for unity in the church." I don't know if you know this, but they reported those same 5 things last year as their prayer and fasting group was praying for them, consistent, undistracted in what God is calling them to do. Connie Carranza, the pastor of our La Familia de Dios church, also stated that they participated in the $500,000 mobilization, resulting in new motivation, new families connected with the church, and more people being involved in prayer and service. She says they are seeing a new awakening in their church. We also saw some of our churches respond to the challenge to raise up and develop new ministers and to help those who may be experiencing a call to vocational ministry to explore and respond to that call. Alex and Amparo Martinez have been focused on this for several years. Because of their investment in helping people respond to God's call, we have 2 churches and 1 ministry on our district that have benefited from their investment into people who they have identified and developed in ministry. The Litchfield Hispanic Ministry is being led by Pastor Josefina Eriguin, I hope I said that right, and her husband Miguel Zacharias. The Montrose Palabra Viva Church is now being led by Pastor Jose Calderon and his wife Maria de Jesus, and the church in East St. Paul is being led by Pastor Joel Perez and his wife Marta Alacron. Alex and Amparo are in the process of following a vision to start another church and ministry in the Twin Cities area. They have just returned from taking a year's leave of absence to Colombia, where they have been since early last fall, establishing a new ministry there called Foundation Mission Timoteo, where they raised up leaders there who are now running the ministry in Cali, Colombia, working among the children, currently serving 32 kids to establish an after-school program where they provided a meal, school supplies, and tutored the children using their material from the foundry. And they are engaging their families and leading their families to Jesus. The Bacchus Church and Pastor John Rister have been instrumental in helping Matt Dixon, who is here today, explore his call to ministry. Matt has received his local license and is working with the youth and young adults in Bacchus. He's also pursuing his education through Nazarene Bible College. We look forward to issuing his first district license to him in the future. The Bacchus Church is also they have just dedicated their new addition in July, which will be a great place for the youth in the Bacchus community to gather. We also celebrate those who responded to the challenge to start more churches and ministries. In addition to the vision of Amparo and Alex to start a new bilingual church in the cities, Gus Lopez is continuing to do the work necessary to start a church in the core of Minneapolis. He's been working hard this past year to raise funds and to identify people who can partner with he and Esperanza in establishing Our Hope Church in North Minneapolis. He has shared his vision with 12 of the churches on our district and is raising up a launch team. We would appreciate your prayers because it has been difficult to identify affordable housing in North Minneapolis, if you can believe that. It's been very difficult. So pray for them as we find the right house. Also, our Mandan Engaged Church, with campuses in Mandan and Dickinson, has started a new ministry. Pastor Chip Garrison says this: "We took a step of faith and partnered with Saul Carenza and Selamit Zoller to begin a new Spanish ministry at Mandan Engage, and we've seen growth, including 2 salvations and 2 baptisms. Selamit is a joy to work with and has stretched us as we now think not only about Mandan campus and the Dickinson campus, but also the Spanish work." And this past year, collectively, we made a significant kingdom impact financially. We gave $436,071 to the World Evangelism Fund. That's $9,959 more than we gave a year ago. And another $280,917 to World Mission. We are a part of a global movement of Nazarenes, now in over 30,700 churches around the world. And through the united vision of these movement-focused churches, we celebrated the church multiplying into 164 countries of the world, as Dr. Chambo shared with us yesterday. In a number of these countries, which the church operates underground, and our district is a vital part of this international movement of the people of God. Thank you for your generosity. We gave $172,151 to Mid-American Nazarene University. That's $6,109 over last year. All of those funds were used as scholarships for Nazarene students and Nazarene pastors' kids to help them attend a university that teaches with a Christian worldview and not only prepares students for their careers, but to serve Christ and his kingdom. And we gave $172,665 to pensions and benefits. That's $5,728 more than last year. These dollars provide a great help to retired pastors and missionaries, as well as investment into the 403B retirement savings plan, long-term disability benefits, life insurance benefits, and medical payment assistance when needed for ordained and licensed ministers who qualify. So how do we say thank you to our pastors and our leaders? It's been quite a year, and I know the effect it's had on you. We can't say thank you enough, pastors and families and leaders, for pouring your kingdom, your life out for kingdom purposes for the glory of God. I like what Hebrews 6:10 says. God will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. We are also thankful for all the associate pastors and staff members of our churches and the lay people who stand beside them as they carry out this incredible work for the Lord. I would like to take a moment before we talk about next year to thank the people for the role you have played in the kingdom work on the Prairie Lakes District this last year. First and foremost is my helpmate, Gina. If you don't know it, this woman is amazing. Did you know that? She is. She's amazing. And on Saturday, we celebrated 39 years of marriage together, and I don't want to hear another comment about my picture, all right? Her encouragement, faithfulness, personal devotion to God, her work behind the scenes, and her love for all of you, really, it's amazing, and she's the best. I love you, sweetheart, and thank you. And now I would like to mention some special people that serve you at the district level, and this doesn't represent everybody, but it gets a start. As I call your name, would you please stand? Alicia Peterson, Administrative Assistant. Saul Carranza, Hispanic Ministries Coordinator. Dan Broughton, Church Planting Coordinator, who lives in Kansas City but works part-time for us. Jeff O'Rourke, District Secretary and Assistant District Superintendent part-time. Lee Danielson, District Treasurer. Christina Seuss, Nazarene Missions President. Jordan Seuss, Nazarene Youth President. Dave McGaffey, Discipleship Chairman. Peggy Wagner, Chairperson of the Board of Ministry. Derek Sint, Secretary of the Board of Ministry. District Advisory Board members Jeff Chaffin, Les Hamilton, Don Williamson, Peggy Wagner, Ken Moorhead, and Jim Comfort. And family camp directors Les and Michelle Hamilton and Nick and Tammy Elkins. Mission area leaders Sean Fletcher, Sam Birch, Dave McGaffey, Mark Hale, Tony Freeberg, Tim Asbill, Isaiah Blees, Brad Griffin, Rich Wyatt, Aaron Manansky, and then Israel Carranza as our translator. Would you thank all of these people for the work they have done to help us get where we're going? Thank you. You may be seated. We also want to thank our chaplains, missionaries, and evangelists from our district. We have some amazing people who serve in these areas. Did you know that we have military chaplains? We have hospice chaplains. We have prison chaplains and missionaries. A thanks goes to all of you. If you serve in any of these areas, would you please stand? I know some are not here today. All right, thank you, Christian. Serving as a military chaplain. I want to thank all of our pastors. If you pastor a church or you're on staff at one of our churches, would you please stand? Can we thank them out of the bottom of our heart for the way they have served Jesus Christ last year? You are heroes. You are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So where do we go from here? Our theme this year is undistracted. You can see the beautiful paintings that are up behind us here. They brought all the way from Aberdeen, South Dakota. We thank you, Aberdeen Church, for bringing them, and Joe Hauer for putting them up. Joe sprained his foot badly recently. He thought he broke it, but it was only a sprain. I'm sorry, Joe. And with his foot in a boot, he came and was able to get all those up that high, and we just thank him for that. But you can see these beautiful paintings and them hanging behind me. These represent the 7 I am statements from Jesus in the gospel. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. I am the light of the world. I am the true vine. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the resurrection and the life. Not only does Jesus declare that he will bring life, but he also declares in Matthew 16:18 that he will build his church and the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. When I was in Israel in 2020, I stood in Caesarea Philippi, somewhere in that area where Jesus declared those words. Friends, Jesus is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And one of the greatest ways that the enemy seeks to kill and destroy is to distract the body of Christ, the church, from its source of power and from its mission. Jesus is our source, and making disciples is our mission. So how do we keep from being distracted from that? It's quite simple. Not easy, but quite simple. In a world full of distraction, in a world full of division and discouragement and death, the writer of Hebrews instructs us to run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. If we want to live this life and run the race that God has chosen for us, then we must be undistracted. We must fixate on Jesus. The enemy will go to great lengths to distract you. You know this. To discourage you, to destroy you. But as Louis Giglio stated in the title of his book, don't give the enemy a seat at your table. Amen? God has prepared a table for you in the presence of your enemies. And the devil is not invited to that table. But sometimes we give him a seat. And we get distracted. And at that table with Jesus, when it's just you and Jesus, you will find everything you need to join him in this journey as he builds his church. There's freedom at that table. And even though we are living, as Jay Height said, in times of great unsettling, Jesus is our firm foundation, so let's fix our eyes on him. It can be easy to see that all that's against Christ and his church. There's an event in the Old Testament that can encourage us, because even though it may seem at times, right, that the enemy is winning, it may seem that way, greater is the one who is in us than he who is in the world. In 2 Kings 6, in a season of conflict and war, the king of Aram was bearing down on Israel, trying to take whatever shots he could to wreak destruction in the cities of the people of God. But God, as he does, tips Elisha off to the plans of the enemy. Do you know God can do that for us too? Time and again, in 2 Kings 10:6, time and time again, Elisha warned the king of Israel so that he was on guard in such places. So the king of Aram was going to see to it that Elisha died, because Elisha was the one that was thwarting his plans. Elisha and his servant had traveled to Dothan, and when the king of Aram knew where Elisha was, he sent an army of men with chariots and horses to kill Elisha. They arrived, as the enemy does, in the cover of darkness and surrounded the city. Elisha's servant was up early in the morning, and when he went outside, he saw the army surrounding the city. "Oh, no, my Lord, what shall we do?" Is that the question you've asked sometimes when you feel surrounded? What shall we do when it looks like the enemy has surrounded you? I've asked that question. What shall we do? We do what Elisha did. You see, Elisha had his eyes fixed on Jesus, and I'm quite confident he prayed prayers like prayers of revelation and protection and direction. And God showed him. And so he said to his servant, "Don't worry. God has got us covered." And he declared it this way: "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And then he prayed, not for himself, but for his servant. "Lord, open his eyes. Open his eyes." I pray today that God will open our eyes. May he help you to see who is with you when you feel like so many things are against you. He opened his eyes and he saw the hills full of chariots and horses of fire all around Elisha. God won that battle in an incredible and unique and powerful way. And if you want to know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey said, go and read it in 2 Kings 6:18 through 23. He opened his eyes. He saw the hills full of chariots and horses of fire all around Elisha. Live an undistracted life by fixing your eyes on Jesus, and then take action. I love the way this undistracted word is, because we've got that word act right in the middle of it. See, when we're undistracted, then we can really give ourselves. We can act on the mission that God has given us. One of the stories on our district this past year of a church on mission, choosing to be undistracted, is the story of St. Paul Mosaic. Pastor Jeff O'Rourke and the team at Mosaic have faced some pretty stiff battles when they started to take faith filled with action on what they believed God was calling them to do. And among the things they felt called to do, one of them was establishing an accredited immigration facility to offer their immigrant neighbors low-cost immigration and legal services. We're doing that in Minot too, aren't we, Cyril? They're in the final stages after 8 years of pursuing this journey to establish this resource to help their immigrant neighbors. And they've also been in a 2-year process of placing 6 tiny homes on their church land for people experiencing chronic homelessness. They have faced significant opposition from many angles, but they have not been distracted, even though at times they were discouraged. And they have not stopped seeking God for answers. And I was so impressed because I would get a little email note from them every now and then from Ricky. They began to pray for those. Listen to this, guys. They began to pray for good for those who were opposing them. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? They kept applying for all the permits needed. They just kept moving forward. And today, by the grace of God, those homes are on their property, and they will soon be welcoming their new neighbors to their new homes. Pastor Jeff O'Rourke finished his report this way: when Mosaic finds itself facing challenging seasons, we're able to look back and say, God was faithful then, surely he will be again. We are in awe of his goodness. He is trustworthy. We cannot wait to see what the Lord will do next. So here's my challenge to you this year. Would you be willing to join with other churches on the district and lead your church to fast and pray for 21 days to begin the new year in January? If you sense God has more for your church, join with me and other churches on the Prairie Lakes District in believing him for what he has for you and your community. Prayer is powerful, and the Lord instructs us to fast and pray. As Lord Alfred Tennyson said, more things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of. The power of prayer will impact your life and your church and your family in every way. And as January draws closer, we will provide you with more information and tools on how to approach this time of prayer and fasting. Second, develop, declare, or refine your plan as to how you're going to cooperate with Jesus as he builds his church. You may have already have a written plan, an agreed upon plan as to how you're going to fulfill the mission that God has given you. If so, please send that plan to us so we can see it too and pray for you and celebrate the work God has done in your community. If you haven't developed a plan, get together with your leadership team, pray, strategize, and develop one. I would like you to write a plan and send it to the office by November 15th. And I have a compliance officer now to help me see that you get that done. As I read through the reports this year, it was obvious to me that we never get where God is leading us unintentionally. We must be intentional, and we have resources to help you if you need them. Reverend Mark Bain, evangelism coordinator for the Church of the Nazarene, will be on our district to do trainings he calls EMT training, evangelism multiplication training. This training will teach people how to practically participate with God in making disciples. You'll be provided with practical tools and best practices for making Christ-like disciples. Each one who participates in that will leave with a mission action plan, a map for micro and macro multiplication. And you can see the places and dates. And we're probably going to schedule a third one too somewhere in North Dakota. And number 3, and this just came to me this week as God is leading me to do this. I've got, in my devotions, I was typing, journaling, and I wrote out the name of 12 people whom I consider to be righteous people. And I'm inviting them to pray for me regularly. I'm going to send them monthly updates. I'm going to send them emails or call them if I have some special needs come up. And I just encourage you to do the same. Stay in communication with them. Share your hopes, your vision, your struggles, and ask them to pray for specific issues. Because James 5:16 says this, the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And you are not in this alone. If you invite people to pray with you, I guarantee you they'll be happy to do that. And they will join with you in building prayer support for what God has called you to do. And finally, find your lane and run in it. Before the writers of Hebrew instructs us to fix our eyes on Jesus, he encourages us to run and to do so with perseverance, the race marked out for us. I've been so impacted, and many of you know this already, by a movie that came out called The Free Burma Rangers. It's a story of David Eubank, who was a special operations person in the Army, and when he retired, he moved to Burma because God called him to work among the most oppressed peoples of the world. And then he went to Iraq, to Mosul of all places, in the middle of the war there. And he said this in one of the vignettes as they captured in this documentary on his life. And I close with this. You have one life, and you might as well go for it. What are you going to hold on to? You're going to lose your life one day anyway. So saying yes is, God, all the good things you have for us, I want them. Anything useful I can do, I would like to do it. So I will say yes. And I want to say no to the swamp of sin on one side that gets me bogged down, and no to the good things to do, Christian things to do, that God didn't ask me to do, that will also bog me down. And I want to say yes to that lane that God has, which I believe has no caution lights. It's green. Go as fast as you can, as much faith as you have. Go. That's what I want you to do. Live an undistracted life. Respectfully submitted, Steve Hoffman.